What a wild week it has been in DC and in politics in America. It's just stunning. It's only been a few days since we had the White House Correspondents' Dinner and that attempt at assassinating the president. Scott MacFarlane from Medias Touch is here. He's the chief Washington correspondent. Hopefully, we can do this on a regular basis, Scott. It's always great to see you.
Hey, Zev, good to be here.
Can you believe this week? Can you believe how quickly it's gone and everyone sort of moved on from what would have normally been a dominating cycle of just, who did that to the president? And we've all moved on so quickly.
Part of it, I think, is the same reason things moved pretty quickly in Butler, Pennsylvania, because he doesn't talk about it. He gets asked questions. He kind of equivocates when he answers them. He's mushy about it, doesn't bring it up unsolicited. He turns the page on this stuff pretty fast, which I think allows the public to do so more quickly than maybe we would have thought 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, look, it is significant that the assailant or attacker, or call him what you will, was a floor above him on a concourse and still very far away from him, not in the same room, not on the same floor, and maybe he didn't even fire a shot.
And the people in that part of the room, and I've talked to a number of them, the part nearest the president didn't hear a thing. They heard nothing. Those in the back of the room closest to the sealed doors may have heard some pretty scary stuff, but I think the reaction at the front of the room, including from the president, was just to the security moving around. So maybe that has a different experience than those who actually heard those gunshots and were first to get beneath the tables.
We got this new video out today. Where is it? Here we go. It's interesting that there he is. That's Cole walking through those security doors, and there's a canine, a dog sniffing canine that follows them there. And then seems to, I don't know if the security guy is actually talking to him, but he sort of pulls away and walks away. And then the charge happens. I don't know what this all means, and I'm not going to pretend that we can analyze it, but it is interesting that all of this was going on. That there was some knowledge of him prior to him actually storming the magnetometers.
It looked like there might have been some interaction, potentially, with the canine officer and with Tomas Allen. Maybe. A couple things jump out at me. First of all, we all have our camera phones, which kick ass. Is this the last vestige of crappy pixelated video that exists in America? Surveillance camera video. I mean, this is trash, and it's a private sector camera. It's not a government camera, but it's kind of tough to look at. And what's more, wouldn't you love to see the next camera over? And I wonder if that exists. The one.
There must be. Every foot of this place must be covered. But you're right. The quality is really unbelievable that you're watching this blur move through. I mean, we should be able to see exactly what he's doing. It is interesting that there's an interaction there. I don't know how that weapon appeared. I mean, this is happening in real time, and he's holding a rifle in his hand suddenly. The guy walks in. Then there's the canine with the officer. What's going on back there? Like, does he have his weapon out? I don't understand how quickly all of this happens. There's 3, 4, 5 seconds, and then they're talking or looking at each other, and then the next thing you know, he's out with a full weapon.
Nothing verbal is catching the alarm of the other officers who are there either. So there's nothing suspicious in whatever the canine officer was saying or back and forth. This to me is now in the hands of the Department of Justice, and this looks like a very long haul case. When I was in court twice this week and watched Tomas Allen walk into the courtroom, he doesn't fit any caricature of criminal defendant or political violent person. He has no criminal history, like nothing. They didn't even mention a speeding ticket in his past. He is highly educated, has a master's, is a teacher, seemed in the courtroom to be uniquely soft-spoken and unwilling to break the norms of the courtroom. I'm not saying that there is a stereotype for somebody who's engaging in political violence, but he most certainly doesn't fit the type.
No, he doesn't. It's interesting. He's a very a churchgoer, apparently. He's very devout. He's even in his email to his friends and family, he was very respectful. And even to law and order, he was very concerned about not causing any collateral life damage or anything like that. He was so careful about that. So it's a weird thing that he's trying to, attack the presidency in this violent way.
As somebody who was there in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 24th, 2024, I should say, I was astounded by how fast the country kind of turned the page on that. Um, Generally speaking, and that's it's a broad statement, not specific to any individual, but we moved on pretty fast from talking about that publicly. And I think in part it's because the president turned the page on that and didn't talk about it publicly. He doesn't bring it up. He doesn't really engage deeply or colorfully when asked questions about either the White House Correspondents' Dinner incident or the one that nearly took his life in July 2024. And that allows I guess the country to not fixate on it. It really is something, Zeb, that it's been only a week and
Mm.
we moved on to other things.
It's interesting how quickly they were quick to react on the night and make that call for the ballroom. And the next day we had the 60 Minutes interview. And then Monday morning, Carolyn Levitt was out with a whole list of people that she was attaching to this assassination attempt. And that seemed to roll out pretty quickly. But when it comes to actually talking about the events, he's very quiet.
It does seem the White House has been mechanizing this over the course of the first 7 days to try to leverage it towards getting a ballroom. But the public opinion on the ballroom is in the toilet for the administration, and they don't seem to be moving the meter. And last weekend's incident doesn't seem to be moving the meter. We're talking about a small minority of Americans support this White House ballroom. And I wonder if it wouldn't even be smaller, Zev, if they renamed it the Trump ballroom instead of the White House ballroom. It's not the time, I think, to argue for things that are ornate, that have marble or precious stone, when people are looking at $5 and $6 a gallon for gasoline. Just bad timing on that. And though there is a security function to it, clearly, that security apparatus can still be built. The judges have not stopped that from going forward. They've just paused or are poised to pause the above ground stuff.
Yeah. They should call it the Marie Antoinette ballroom is probably the most accurate term I've heard of it or description of it. Speaking of numbers that are in the toilet, here's the latest polling out of the the Washington Post, that are on the Iran war. 61%. That's the number that landed on the front page today of the Washington Post. 61% say that they believe the Iran war, the president's attack on Iran, was a mistake. That is a phenomenally high number, especially when it's worded that way, was a mistake. And you look at the way disapproval matches historic lows of the Iraq War and Vietnam. This is a very unpopular endeavor, yet he continues to prosecute this war.
That bottom line is so important, Zev. It took 6 years for Vietnam to reach that level of disapproval, and we are here after 60 days in Iran. Obviously, these are asymmetric things, what's happened in Iran so far and the grueling ground war of Vietnam, of which my father was a veteran and later died from Agent Orange cancer. The Iraq war, I think, really is the more startling contrast to me, because in 2003, there was a rallying around the flag. I think in the initial months, you'll recall this better than me, but I remember a rallying around the flag. The Gulf War in 1991 was a Herculean rallying around the flag. George H.W. Bush's approval ratings were skyrocketing during it as the country came together. This is whatever this is the opposite. And I don't know that politics needs to be the driving force when there's a war going on, but this seems to be a cancerous thing politically for everybody associated with the president.
Especially heading into the elections. I mean, it's very difficult. These are some other numbers here. Was the war the right decision? 79% of Republicans are saying yes. I believe that's what it's saying here. And the GOP lean independents are saying 52%. Meanwhile, Democrats, 76% wanted peace deal. Now, 61% say they're in favor of using military force against Iran. Sorry, what does that mean, actually? 61% say using military force was a mistake. That's the same number we just saw. Anything strike you here about the relatively low number of Republicans who are normally quite full-throated supporters of the president's decision? They're not full-throated about this one.
It's a bad number among Republicans in the Trump world. By Trump standards. Think about that as a report card. Say you got a 79% in one class and a 52% in another class. Yeah. For some students, that's an acceptable grade. But think of your A student. Your daughter or your son who's used to getting A's. You see those grades pop up and you have to have a conversation. Trump usually gets A's with Republicans. I mean, it's been a really sturdy foundation he has. And that's a tough report card for him in this subject. I did notice as the week concluded, Zev, a talking point that I heard members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, echoing. Clearly, they had tried to synchronize on a message. And when asked about the impact this is having on the economy and the endless potential loop that we're in the Middle East, they seem to coincide on a message of president's first task is to defend the Constitution and protect national security, and that ensuring Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon is worth the short-term cost. They're working with that. That message has resulted in, drum roll, Zev, those numbers on war approval among Republicans and a 61% overall disapproval. They may need to try something else.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons why it could be really harmful in the long term. Of course, the price of oil and gas is chief among those. Americans are feeling the pinch. 6 in 10 report at least one war-related impact. 60% say the war has increased the recession risk. 40% say they're driving less. 30% say they've changed travel plans. And 50% say they expect gas prices to get worse in a year. Not good going into an election. Any of those indicators are really troubling.
The middle two numbers also indicate, the ones that are in yellow, indicate to me some downstream impacts on businesses. People are driving less. What does that mean for the stores? What does that mean for the people who employ our brothers and sisters, our neighbors, our friends? What does it mean when people change travel plans? It means an awful lot if you live in Orlando and need to keep your business going. If you live in Nashville, and need to keep your business going because tourism drives so much of these cities and so much of our U.S. communities. I worry about the downwind effects of those two middle numbers, and voters do too. I mean, voters are not a monolith, but they recognize gas prices are a leading indicator of bigger problems. And the bigger problems are what are going to cannibalize support for incumbent members of Congress and ultimately political support for the White House.
Yeah, I'm going to play a clip in a second from the president about why he thinks they're not doing so well, and that's because he thinks he's not on the ballot. But let's just look at these other quick numbers here. Americans feel less safe, 61% on the Iran war. That's a 13-point jump from when we had the Soleimani attack in 2020. That's not good for a guy who's bringing peace to the world and is going to not attack Middle East countries to start long-term wars. Then you've got a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. That's that incredibly, how can we say, the tone-deaf Truth Social post that he put out, not receiving any positive results, even from MAGA Republicans, saying 50%, 7% reacted positively. That's a very low number. And finally here, a whole civilized, that's the same one. So you've got the general idea here. There's even Republicans, even MAGA Republicans, not loving the way he's handling the communication around this war.
The White House has been accused frequently of trying to change the subject with distractions. They've been accused of a wag the dog in reverse, where they're trying to find ways to look over here at box number 2 while I rearrange what's going on in box number 1. They've been accused of doing that, Zeb, with the Epstein files. They've been accused of doing that with the tariff crisis that the president triggered. I don't know that you can redirect America's attention away from prices.
No.
I mean, you can't get people to stop thinking about what they pay on Saturday morning at the grocery store. When it gets close to $300, they're going to notice that and they're going to remember it. When they have to fill up the tank twice a week or every week, it's hard to redirect them. You may be able to redirect them from the Epstein files because though the survivors will never forget, maybe your attention can be diverted. Maybe it's easier to divert their attention away from other failures, but Godspeed if they're going to try to distract us from prices. I don't know that it's possible. If it is possible, it's going to be quite a lesson for politicians in the future to follow.
And if you think about it, these are exactly the same levers that America is using against the Iranians. They know that the pressure of everyday Americans to have their daily lives, being fulfilled and being able to afford daily life in Iran is one of the pressures the Iranian regime is facing. It's also a pressure the American regime is facing because those are the same levers that people can really pull in a war, whether we like it or not. This is a war, and it's largely an economic war in terms of the perception of how people feel at home, and that will drive the real impact along down the line. Now, here's Donald Trump yesterday on Newsmax, which I never watch, but let's see what he said. No, we'll try again.
Vince, everyone says if I
he doesn't want to play,
would win in a landslide. I have some of the best poll numbers I've ever had, and the war is actually Harvard-Harris just came out with a poll. Stopping Iran from having a nuclear weapon is a positive thing, not a negative thing.
So he's echoing what you're saying there, but that's not the problem with that he's not on the poll. That's not the reason they're not going to do well.
No, the White House knows that. The Republican campaign committees know that.
You know what? I've lost you, Scott. I don't know why. There you are. You're back. You're back.
I kind of liked how I
me?
danced around there for a while. I've never moved so smoothly.
I can make you dance. I can make you
That's
dance.
nice.
You got a whole thing. You know, I bet you're a good dancer. Are you a good dancer?
And when I start tapping into the booze beneath the bar, I am. But that's or maybe just in my own mind, I am.
It's always about whether you're a dancer in your own mind.
In my own mind, that's right.
Never depends on anybody else. Are you having your big happy hour tonight at 5:00?
I am 5:00 East Coast. Even if it's 2:00 where you are, or 1:00 where you are, it's good enough. It's close enough. It's Friday.
Yeah, it's Friday.
The DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which has the task of winning the majority and putting a throttle on Trump, sent out an image last night of about a dozen Republican House members who were around President Trump yesterday for that event in the Oval Office. And talking about some of the more endangered Republicans. Bill Huizenga of Michigan, Nick Begich of Alaska, Mike Lawler of New York. That's the type of technique you employ as a campaign congressional committee if you think the president is just distinctively weak. You don't try that in purple areas or reddish areas if you think the president's holding his own or even close to holding his own. They believe he is so vulnerable right now that it's efficacious to just put photos of frontline members next to him. We'll see if it works or not, but that they think it's worthy of employing speaks to all those graphics and all those polls you just showed.
Mm-hmm. Now, there is the lead story that everyone's talking about. There being 60 days now. We must have congressional, a all powers resolution passed. That's not really going to happen, is it? And there's no ways that it's really going to have a huge impact, whether it is passing or not.
The supporters of it think it's like a boulder you push up the hill, which speaks to two different things. First of all, that it's a heavy lift to get people to support this thing, no matter what's happening in Iran, but that you do it slowly and steadily and repetitiously, that they're going to continue to stage and hold these votes until they can erode more of the opposition. And we've seen some of the more versatile Republicans, the ones who are more likely to cross over on things, they've started to express support for the war powers resolution, but not the ones who are hard to get, not one that says, ooh, they just got Republican so-and-so. The walls may be crumbling now. I haven't seen that, but they're going to keep having the vote. I think it sends a message politically and institutionally about the prerogatives and the powers of Congress, but it also is a political message. It reminds and raises the profile of the fact that the president owns this war. They want to be clear. They want to be unambiguous about that with voters, that the president owns this war, and if they continue to circumvent the war powers of Congress, they are putting more of their fingerprints at the White House on this thing.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point, Scott. I guess the highlight for my week was watching Pete Hegseth in front of those two committees. In terms of, raw television, that was pretty good television, and he sort of held his own. I think he mostly, didn't completely embarrass himself. There were a couple of moments that really stuck out, and let's listen to one of them. I think the first one, Kelly, was really, really interesting. This came out in the Senate hearing, so it was the second in the days. But this was a very, very good confrontation.
I'll give you one more.
I don't know why this is not. Let me see if I can move these things out and try to play it here.
To address a question here. It's my understanding that the definition of no quarter is that legitimate offers of surrender will be refused or that detainees will be executed. Is that your understanding of the definition?
The only entity that would kill detainees or target civilians is the Iranians, and they're the ones being crushed.
So
it's the Iranian military and their military capabilities.
The question is,
I disagree completely with your articulation.
No, do you understand the definition that I just read you? Because that's the definition from your department's law of war manual. Is that your understanding? And I'm gonna just get to the point here.
We fight to win and we follow the law, Senator.
Okay, so your quote was, "We will keep pushing, keep advancing, no quarter, no mercy for our enemies." And yesterday, you did not clarify whether you stand by this statement. So I'm going to give you another opportunity to clarify if that is what you meant. Do you stand by that statement you made on March 13th?
We have untied the hands of our warfighters. We fight to win, and we follow the law.
Okay, so you're not clarifying. So you stand by that statement. So you're the Secretary of Defense. The things you say matter. And your response here, right now, makes it clear to the American people exactly why you are not right for this job.
It makes it clear.
Quite a moment, isn't it? What are your thoughts?
There's a theatrics to congressional hearings no matter what the circumstance. Always has been, always will be. Usually you don't get those in the Senate Armed Services Committee because they're talking about issues of war and peace and life and death. In the Trump administration, based on the incivility he has injected into our politics and the response to the incivility from others who want to fight fire with fire, the theatrics have been out of control the last 15 months, out of control. This is a more muted congressional hearing, relatively speaking, that I've laid eyes on, but it's hard to get past how Hegseth comported himself. He was accused of smirking a lot, of being dismissive of people, of being dismissive of questions, of being, I'm sorry for lack of a better phrase, performative. And though that's a component of congressional hearings, it's often not when the defense secretary is literally talking about a war. So I don't know if he swung anybody's opinion on anything. I'm not sure that he did a whole lot to inform the public or the Congress about what's actually happening on the ground. The person next to him, not General Dan Kane, but the third witness, speaking at the House Armed Services Committee hearing Wednesday, Zev, finally revealed a price tag for this thing, saying it was cost $25 billion so far, and that they're coming back soon to ask for more taxpayer money in a supplemental request. Could be many tens of billions of dollars more. So that's the first piece of information we've actually gotten on cost, and it didn't come from Hegseth himself, even though Pete Hegseth's been asked that several times. And I'll add this footnote. After the Senate committee hearing, the one you're showing, had a number of folks come up and say they think that $25 billion figure is a nasty low ball, that it's cost a lot more than that.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. And in fact, it was on the record as well inside it that this is just a very, very low number. And the reality is going to come back much higher. And of course, on top of that, there's a $1.5 trillion budget the Pentagon is looking for. That's a lot of money to be spending on military. The day before was the congressional hearing. And this was probably one of the biggest highlights.
And get them to a point where they're at the table giving it up in a way that
so they
never have it.
So they haven't broken yet. Okay, we haven't gotten there yet for all of the.
Well, their nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Underground, they're buried, and we're watching them 24/7. So we know where any nuclear material might be.
Reclaiming my time for
a
quick second here. We had to start this war, you just said, 60 days ago, because the nuclear weapon was an imminent threat. Now you're saying that it was completely obliterated?
They had not given up their nuclear ambitions, and they had a conventional shield of thousands of missiles.
So Operation Midnight Hammer accomplished nothing of substance. It left us at exactly the same place we were before. So much so that
their facilities were bombed and obliterated. Their ambitions continued, and they're building a conventional shield.
Let me try again.
It's the North Korea strategy. You know this very well. The North Korea strategy was use conventional missiles to prevent anybody from challenging them, so they could slow walk their way to a weapon. President Trump saw Iran at its weakest moment, took an action to ensure, in a way that only the United States.
I mean, there is this inherent contradiction, isn't there? This regime is not obliterated. And yet they continue.
It's also, I'm sorry, it's all relative, isn't it? I mean, they may characterize obliteration differently in Iran because they're fighting a different type of war. There's not a traditional battlefield, but I'm sorry, with red coats and bayonets and patriots firing muskets at each other. This is different. And I'm not sure that people grasp that they're not going to view defeat or victory the same way we do. And that's why I think you had Pete Hegseth talking past members of Congress and then talking past him. I found this a very unhelpful, uneducating set of testimonies from Pete Hegseth. And I had some aspiration because the House and Senate Armed Services Committee, Zev, they are uniquely bipartisan. They're not totally bipartisan, but they have a special way of carrying themselves where they don't fight amongst each other. And they didn't over the last couple of days. They directed all of their questioning at Pete Hegseth and didn't have any intramural squabbling, which is different by Congress's standards. I just didn't find a whole lot of helpful information here.
No, it seemed to be all for the public and probably for the audience of one, which is sitting in the White House. The biggest story of the week that I think just really underlines the strangeness of our times is the Comey indictment. So bizarre to have it happen right after the assassination attempt, or so-called assassination attempt. It just made it look very directed. It's about these seashells and these numbers, 8647, which mean different things to different people. No matter what the president or the DOJ wants to say, it definitely means various things. But the optics of going at Comey for the second time, so disturbing.
Not a whole lot of people that I've spoken to over the last week think the Department of Justice is going to win this thing, that they're going to win this case. I talked to the most ardent, loyal Trump ally there is in Congress, Troy Nehls, the retiring Republican from Texas. He told me this case looks weak, and he's not really sure a jury's going to convict on it, that it looks like a stretch, in his words. That's Troy Nehls. That's like asking your mother if you're a good boy. I mean, he's gonna say good things about you. So
right.
that if he's throwing shade on it, that's a problem. But I also think it's not necessarily the end goal. That they have a different view of how to mechanize the Department of Justice under the Trump administration, that sometimes they can use it to be a menace versus be a defender. Or they're not necessarily trying to convict James Comey. They're trying to cause trouble for James Comey, I think a lot of critics would say. They're just filing the case, forcing him to go to get arraigned, forcing him to have a booking photo taken, to pay for a lawyer, to have this heartburn in his life may be the goal. The process is the goal versus securing a conviction. I don't know this case stands up to. Well, yeah, and I don't think this case stands up to the first request for dismissal by a judge. A grand jury saw fit to indict him, but that's a big difference from a trial jury.
Why did they see fit to indict him? I don't understand there is no thread there. I mean, there really is no thread there.
Well, we do know there have been requests made to get the grand jury transcripts released so that people can lay eyes on what the heck happened in that room and how they convinced these grand jurors. But two things to keep in mind about grand jury proceedings. Grand juries don't have to be unanimous. They don't have to be unanimous to approve an indictment. You just have to hit a certain majority. What's more, there is zero defense presented in a grand jury room. You only hear what the prosecutors have curated for you to hear, and they may have mechanized that power to say certain things, not untruthful things, but to curate things in just a certain way to get a grand jury to go along. Let's see if that holds up. If trial jury in the Middle District of North Carolina gets their hands on this.
The most surprising thing about this whole thing is the president himself put out a Truth Social explaining what 8647 meant to him. And he says, in the mob world, 8647 means kill the person because it's 8 miles out, 6 feet under. I'd never heard that about this term 8647. Most people associated with working in a restaurant, and you 86 an item on the menu, or you 86 someone in the line to a club, but I've never heard it used that way, which is sort of a tell about the president. I mean, this is the world he comes from understands 8647 in a certain way.
I think those of us who are, for lack of a better term here, well-rooted or continually on social media can tell you we see a lot more threatening things posted in our mentions every day.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to start prosecuting people for ambiguous references to 86ing things, I got a whole bunch of replies to show you from, yesterday, if we want to start down that path.
Absolutely. People can be brutal online. It'll be interesting to see what happens on that front. Next week, is it next week or the week after that we get to hear from Pam Bondi at the Epstein oversight hearings? I'm excited about that, if she shows up and if she actually answers anything.
I think it's a couple weeks out, and it's a closed door interview, but they'll likely release the full copy of it, perhaps video and audio of it. So we'll be able to watch it play out, just not in real time, like a live hearing. But we should be able to hear all the questions, all the answers, and let's see how she conducts herself. If she still has that fire and brimstone, some would say inappropriateness, with which she carried herself during public hearings on Epstein. You'll recall she kept her back to the survivors.
Yeah.
And when she was facing certain questions from certain members of the panel, Zeb, instead of answering them, she threw counter punches, maligning
The Dow's
the
at
people asking
50,000.
questions.
The Dow's at 50,000.
Dow's 50,000.
Yeah. We shouldn't leave the show without talking about the decision in Louisiana versus Calais and the stripping of the Voters' Rights Act, or parts of it at least. This is having a detrimental effect on the Black Caucus, obviously, as they're looking at some of their districts being completely redistricted around them, and a lot of them, going to be losing their representation in Congress. It's moving fast. Louisiana is already holding back some of their primaries based on this. Is this going to be contagious, and is it contagious enough to really help Republicans in November?
It was already contagious. I think other states were going to do this anyhow, as early as 2028. No matter what, the court ruling allows southern states to be more aggressive about it than they otherwise were going to be, to totally eradicate the safeguards that are in there to ensure minority voters have representation. There's going to be an effort to challenge Louisiana in court to stop them from stopping the primaries. Not sure where that goes. Alabama can't move on it this year, I'm told by Democrats there. It seems unlikely in Mississippi. Georgia can't move on it. There's not going to move on it this year. I'd watch Tennessee. There's one Democratic seat. One. They may try to box out. They may lose one in Louisiana. But the Democratic strategists with whom I speak say we're talking about 3 or 4 seats total. That's what Virginia did in just one state earlier this spring. But yeah, come 2028, not only will states be moving aggressively to get rid of these seats, Democratic-led states will respond in kind. I just talked to a New York Democrat who says we have to get aggressive about it by the end of this year to set the table for next year so we can be ready to redistrict for 2028. They're all going to move on this. It's a war that's broken out that could have been prevented if nobody fired a first shot.
It also leaves you with some states having, completely one-party systems, which is never good for any democracy. And we seem to be going in that direction. We're going to redraw the lines based on the Civil War, really, and it's not a good idea. I mean, ultimately, America can't afford going back to those conditions and that kind of standoff.
You see how this Congress is functioning in a remarkably polarized time with very few deal makers. And honestly, the deal makers who exist, the moderates that are out there, are being targeted. They're going to be voted out. We're going to lose them in November, and I'm not sure who's left. I think we have a polarized Congress as long as there's no federal law to end political gerrymandering, and I would not bet $5 on that happening.
No, that's not going to happen anytime soon. Scott MacFarlane of Media's Touch, the chief Washington correspondent. Everybody loves your blog and your feed so much. You're always on the top of the charts here at Substack. Tell everyone where they can find you and why they should subscribe to you and what's happening at 5:00 this afternoon.
Why they should subscribe is it is a 7-day-a-week commodity. So we have news that we break every day of the week, every week of the year. We have a morning newsletter, which is my daily editorial note, the things you can't find in the paper or in press releases, the emerging reporting threads that I've spotted that we're going to talk about as the day goes on. 5 p.m. Eastern on Fridays, we have happy hour at this bar with the booze that's not in sight yet, where we take questions. Whatever questions you have about news, what you want me to pursue, answers come after the first cocktail's open.
I love the MacFarlane bar, 5:00 hour, because it's my first job in radio. Every Friday night at 5:00, we had a corporate bar when those things were still, things you could have
allowed. Yeah.
And it was the best time ever. I mean, we really everyone got to know each other really well. Everyone was relaxed. It gave you a good vibe. It reminds me a lot of what happens at 5:00 when Scott opens the bar for everybody. So check it out at 5:00 this afternoon. And Scott, thanks so much for your insights again. Thanks for your reporting. One of the true reporters here on Substack. Thank you for being here. And we'll do this again, hopefully soon. Cheers, everybody. Have a great day.